Hello, MedTech Insights enthusiasts. This is Dr. Jennifer Joe with my co-host, the fabulous Dr. Ami Bhatt. During each show, we talk with two guests about the latest innovation in digital health, biotech, and healthcare, with the clinician focus and on technologies we think will be game changers. Dr. Bhatt is a cardiologist who built the Massachusetts General Hospital cardiology program and is now rocking along in her new role as Chief Innovation Officer of the American College of Cardiology. For some who don't know it, they have their own venture fund, which Dr. Bhatt might eventually tell us about, where they themselves partner with and invest in up and coming innovations and startups. Dr. Bhatt and I co-authored the 2021 Springer Healthcare Information Technology for Cardiovascular Medicine textbook. If you haven't seen it, please take a look, check it out. It's got some really good insights, and we had some really amazing co-authors such as the Best Buy lead of digital health and also Boston Scientific lead of digital health. When I'm not hosting the show, I see patients in the VA emergency room, urgent care, and hospice settings. MedTech Insights is a live, weekly interactive talk show, and we love interacting with our audience. So if you're watching now, please let us know who you are, where you're watching from, what you're working on, and what you're thinking in terms of digital health. And this today, we're going to do a little bit of crossover into territory that Dr. Bhatt and I are not that comfortable with, which is life sciences and biotech and the amazing innovations going on there. So if you happen to be working on biotech, life science, pharma innovation, please let us know that too. Be sure to post your comments and questions in our social feed on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. We'll be sure to incorporate them in the show. All shows are recorded and available on our website and on YouTube. I'm just going to break there for a little bit and pass it over to Dr. Bhatt because she's got so much to tell us and what's happening in the world of medtech innovation.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jen. I'm excited to be with everybody today. I know many of you may actually be at HIMSS right now, and so you may watch this later, and then others who aren't at HIMSS, hopefully you made time to bring this in. Exciting that there are so many people really focusing on what does digital health mean moving forward. And a large part of that is how do we partner with others to get the work done? And that's where I think innovation, entrepreneurship, and venture investment come together as a beautiful trio to really help us figure out where we're going next. The life sciences companies have been essential in this recently, and so it's really exciting to bring Sanofi here today. In terms of exciting things happening, so we'll have more updates from HIMSS that we'll be able to bring you in the next couple of weeks as well. The Sensor Bio Summit, I hope you've seen Dr. Joe's posts, seems to have been very exciting and excited to hear more about that. And then we have the American College of Cardiology conference, ACC 22, that's coming up at the end of this month, beginning of April. So really excited to have that in Washington, D.C. And a lot of focus in something called the Future Hub on the main stage on innovation this year across
Yeah,
the
Dr.
college.
Bhatt, what you're helping to lead the American College of Cardiology, which has traditionally gathered 60 to 80,000 cardiologists from around the country and around the world. What are you looking at for this year's show or conference?
Yeah, no, very exciting. So first of all, exciting to bring back live conferences. So it is, it's hybrid, but it's still great. Lots of global involvement as well. Really recognizing that the questions that we have and the challenges
Mm.
that we face are not limited to one country or another, especially now over the past 2 years. So a lot of collaborative work to be done, and a lot of partners from a variety of different industries. And I use the word industry very broadly to think about how a lot of the partners that we have who are in the health space or who have come into the health space in the past 2 years really understand the importance of crossing over and being able to work with one another to achieve really important health outcomes. So the science, as always, is going to be amazing at ACC. The innovation is there throughout. The educational offerings are really incomparable. And we're excited to be able to really bring digital health to the stage there as well. So I think it'll be really fun. When we think about moving forward with how we're going to get some of the things we need to get done, I think that's where we start seeing the value of no longer siloing digital health from life sciences either. And so I think that's why both Jen and I are really excited about today. She jokingly says we're a little less comfortable about it. And I think where we're less comfortable is in that intersection, is that we, like many others, have siloed these concepts of digital health that we've pushed forward and the concept of life sciences. And now we're all together trying to figure out what are the best ways for us to work together. Jen, other thoughts before I go ahead and introduce our two guests? I'm going to introduce them both together today.
Our guests are so fantastic that I think we should get them out. Let's start chatting with them and really diving deep into their expertise.
Fantastic. So Sanofi Ventures' Meg Krench, PhD, and Alba Zurriaga Carda, PhD, are our two guests. I'll tell you a little bit about both of them. Meg is a scientist by training. She has a PhD in neuroscience from MIT. And as she likes to say, she got tired of stray Drosophila landing in her coffee. So she moved away from the bench to the biotech world. So after graduating, she worked at RA Capital to help identify and evaluate promising investments in emerging life science companies, both public and private. Then switched to the other side, took a deeper dive into biotech through her role with the External Innovation Group within the BD team at Vertex, and now is at Sanofi Ventures back in the investment side. Alba looks to invest in early stage founders developing digital health solutions specifically at Sanofi. She's looking at how designing, developing, delivering healthcare solutions can be transformed over the next years. Over the last decade, she's worked with some of the world's largest organizations in their digital transformation, really enabling them to create new growth engines by investing into partnering with the startup ecosystem. So a lot of familiarity there with entrepreneurship. And prior to Sanofi, Alba was the global head of innovation strategy for a venture capital firm, 500 Global. So really excited to have both of them here. Quick note, sorry, before you do that, a quick note, no, that is important, I think, especially for our guests today, and as always for Dr. Joe and I, the opinions and the conversations that we have here today reflect those of the four individuals on the call and not of the companies which they represent. Go for it, applause time.
Welcome, Dr.
You're welcome.
Dr. Carda.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is great. So maybe to start this off, Meg and then Alba, each of you can talk a little bit about just the divisions for which you work and where you kind of see the concept of venture and investing and entrepreneurship and where that's going. Meg, from your perspective, we've talked so much about where pharma companies have been, but really now in the digital care delivery world, it's a bit of a left turn. So where are we headed? And then Alba, to you, thinking really about the digital tech world itself. So Meg, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. So yeah, I guess to give a little bit of context, so Alba and I are at Sanofi Ventures, which is the corporate venture capital arm of Sanofi. So it's a really cool position. I think we see ourselves as kind of bridging the gap that can sometimes happen between very early stage innovation and companies that are more mature and ready for business development deals. So Sanofi is there kind of looking at the early stage landscape and looking at where companies are that could be really interesting for partnerships and things like that in the couple of years down the road timeframe. So early stage doesn't scare us. And then as far as kind of, I think you mentioned some of the trends and features that I'm seeing. I think there's a lot of excitement for new modalities and a lot of excitement for cell and gene therapy. I think some of the things that we're going to start to see more and that I've started seeing recently is how to actually turn those really interesting ideas and kind of science fair projects into therapeutics that are going to really be able to impact patients. And I think there's been some very cool data recently showing that we're on the forefront of that innovation. And so I think we'll start to see more in the fields of kind of the enabling technologies. So maybe less splashy, but really critical things like how are we improving manufacturing? How are we actually delivering this? How are we increasing safety margins? So now that we've got all of these cool tools, just making sure we can actually translate them into therapeutics.
That's fantastic. Meg, I love the way you say that, right? Less flashy, but more useful at the end of the day sometimes, right? We really need to enable this to all work. And I think some of the most important work is actually done a little bit behind the scenes. And it's when we get that right that everything else looks better. So I love that. Alba, over to you. Thoughts about your section, if you want to introduce it a little bit, and digital therapeutic.
Certainly, and I'm Meg's counterpart, more focused around digital health, data science, innovation as it affects to the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a relatively newcomer into the industry, coming back after spending the last decade looking at other spaces in which innovation is important and the role that large organizations can play in both investing, acquiring, partnering with the venture ecosystem. So happy to talk about that more. But I think what what brought me and what got me interested into what's happening in pharma is the fact that still with all of the innovation that's happening today, it still takes over almost like a decade and over $1 billion to bring novel drugs to market. And so I'm really passionate and really keen to see what are areas in which we can either reduce the time, the cost, the risk and uncertainty, how to increase the patient centricity to really bring innovation at the forefront. So some of the more kind of like granular trends that I'm excited and looking into is, for example, the use of data and AI to power novel drug discovery. I find that superbly interesting. Also looking a lot to the whole clinical trial innovation space, looking at some of the inefficiencies in the process and how to bridge that. So happy to double click on that too.
Fantastic. So, you mentioned something earlier, and I do want to actually think about clinical trials in that space. But something you mentioned earlier, and Meg, you and I had talked about before, is when people are coming to pharma, kind of thinking of partnering in either one of your realms, they oftentimes don't know when they're ready, if they'll be ready, what someone is looking for. So maybe I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are watching right now, and so I'm kind of specifically doing this for them. Would you both tell us a little bit about how does one prepare to partner for pharma in general? What are the kind of things that you're looking for? What's the stage at which you mentioned early stage is okay for you, Meg, but a little more detail as to how you'd recommend people get ready for that interaction to make it most worthwhile for both parties?
Sure. Yeah, so I think it's exciting and interesting that a lot of pharmas do have these kind of corporate venture groups like the one that Alba and I work for. I think we operate maybe a little bit under the radar. And so when people think about starting relationships with pharma, you think about, okay, I'm going to go to their business development team. But actually, because so many pharmas have groups like ours, I think there are some earlier opportunities. And so for business development, kind of by the nature of what it is, things tend to be a little bit more mature. And so for us, because we're venture capitalists, right? Like nothing is too early, nothing is too scary. So I think sometimes, you'll see maybe you approach the BD team and they think this could be interesting, but it's too early for us. And they might send that over to our side. So I guess when my kind of bottom line would be when you think about engaging with pharma, it's not just business development deals. It's not just like licensing and partnerships. There's also this kind of whole corporate VC arm. Having a corporate VC on your board can kind of bring in that pharma perspective. We like to say that we offer more than capital, of course. And so facilitating introductions to people within Sanofi and kind of bringing in some thought partners. And that way you have somebody there kind of helping you steer the ship and think about what would make you, attractive down the line for partnerships in cases where it's maybe too early right now.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think with Meg is the fact that for founders looking at themselves, it's never too early or too risky for us to take a first look. Like the hope of our venture group is to be able to fill the gap between a company that may not be ready today to partner, but with the capital injection, support, advisory can basically bridge that gap and be ready down the line. So for founders looking to reach out, like happy for us to establish that first touch point. And even if too early, we'll hope to provide you with thoughtful feedback. But it's good for us to also keep a measure on the traction, the tenacity over time. So it's never too early. We look at deals and we look to invest from the seed to Series B for our first check. So feel free to reach out at any point.
I want to emphasize what Alba said just for a minute for the people who are listening. So I think it's so important. And I would say that this is likely true for not only Sanofi, not only for ACC, but for the many different groups who are interested in saying what's out there and how is it growing. Love to meet you early. And if not the right time, really great to develop a relationship and keep track of you, because I suspect there are times where Alba is following something, but later it seems like, you know what, actually, we have an idea or we have a partner or we see something. And so, just because someone looks at you the first time and feels that maybe it's not the right time or fit, that's not a reflection on you. You may get some good feedback, but it's really great to be able to develop those relationships. And you'll always be surprised how some of those relationships may come back and be really helpful later on in a different stage of your company. So important to think about. Jen, thoughts from you or comments from the audience? And otherwise, I have a couple more questions for these guys.
Really impressed on what you guys are doing. And I think, Meg, just sort of touched on the concept of cell and gene, but and I could be wrong about this, but it's a really huge blowing up space that I think medicine has never seen before in terms of what we're able to do and understanding. So, Dr. Bhatt, I had this conversation with Sean Gandhi recently, and he was like, "Oh yeah, there's so many more cells in the immune system than we learned in medical school." Like, I don't know, a lot. I'm like, I thought there were just B cells and T cells. He's like, nope, so many more now. But related to this, we've learned so much. Pharma, I think, is not going to get too excited about it. But from a doctor standpoint, we are curing cancers we have never cured before, whether it's been good progress in potentially curing HIV. We have a few good patient examples. So it's a really exciting time where we're going to cure things that we never thought possible. I think, Dr. Bhatt, when you and I look at what were some of the amazing developments in the history of medicine, there's penicillin, there's anesthesia, there was blood, being able to infuse blood in terms of like massive good that it's done for the world. And I think that this is it. This is the next, this is the big development that will change mankind. So very excited about that. So Meg, so that's what I think of cell and gene. Does that sound about right? Is that me overblowing it?
I definitely think, yeah. I mean, I'm like a geneticist kind of, in my background. So I'm also always really excited about the potential. I think the big question is just going to be access. And so figuring out, again, like, how do we scale this and how do we take it from a clinical trial of 20 patients to, something that's available for patients all over the world, ideally. And so thinking about, manufacturing and costs and things like that will be increasingly important. I think it's also going to be really interesting to watch as cell and gene therapy moves. Right now, the kind of case studies and proof of concepts tend to be in very rare diseases. And so I think it's going to be exciting to see, like, is there potential to move into really, big indications where we would see big populations? And we're starting to see, I think, the early stages of that, but it will be interesting to see where and when cell and gene therapy is the right tool for the job, because you don't want to be a hammer looking for the nail. And so I think there's very cool potential in cases where it's going to be applied in a way that's really thoughtful.
Yeah. I'm just going to dive into that, just one part, because I think a lot of people don't understand what, or not a lot, maybe just doctors don't understand, or maybe it's just me, what Meg talks about in terms of the manufacturing pathway. So these are curing cancers or curing diseases that were never possible before. But it's a really elaborate pathway because it's, we've been talking about personalized medicine for a long time. And originally in medicine, we said personalized medicine was when I can determine what SSRI is right for you to start with. But now personalized medicine is really personalized. So these therapies are, hey, Jennifer, you're a patient now. We're going to suck some cells or some bone marrow out of you. We're going to freeze them. We're going to ship them across the world or maybe locally. But, they take really advanced manufacturing sites. We're going to do some really crazy, fancy manipulations, improvements on them. We're going to make them super cells that can then go back in and fight your cancer. But then how do we get it back to Jennifer, the patient? Then they have to freeze it and send it all the way back. So that's like a super expensive personalized medicine pathway that Meg is talking about. And that we haven't had with pills, right? Like a pill is you sit in a manufacturing plant, you have to get all the materials together, boom, 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 and you have to ship it out. But that's it. But this is way more complicated. So that's a hurdle that we have to think about, I think, as a society and also the business of medicine, which is, now the science is there. How do we rally as a society to pay for it? I don't know if Meg and Alba have thoughts on that.
Yeah, hoping with kind of increasing innovation, right, that we're able to make all of that much more accessible. But you have to start somewhere. I think the place that we're at right now is really cool. And so we're in, I think, how exciting is it, right, that this is the problem that we're having is just like, how do you scale it? So I feel like scale is something that you guys talk a lot about in digital health, Alba. So.
Oh my goodness. So I need to jump on the scale. I'm so glad you said that because the minute you said the word scale, I was like ready to jump in. That is the issue at the table for almost everyone, whether you're talking about a small cardiovascular group practice, whether you're talking about a major academic system with multi-specialties, whether it's an entrepreneurial group or startup, or even, a well-established company that's already in the health space. All of them are thinking about how am I going to take this next thing to scale?
Mhm.
And how am I going to do it better than we used to do it before? Right. So one is, Alba, it's new in digital health. How do you take digital health to scale? The second is, Meg, we have some very traditional ways that things go through clinical trials, go to scale, but we have a large group of people who would argue that that multiple, large, you know, international randomized controlled trial mechanism is maybe not the ideal way to do it. Maybe there are better ways to do it. So in both of your arenas, we kind of see that. So I would love to just hear your thoughts about how are we going to get there better? Do we have insights onto that? And then I have a follow-up question after that. Alba, let's go to you first.
Yeah, I can go on first. And I would say that the beauty about data science, AI is the fact that it has such a huge scalability potential. And as Meg was saying, I think we're witnessing in the ecosystem like a level of innovation and sophistication that we haven't seen in the past. And so today we see basically new sensors that are able to capture all forms of data, make it accessible both continuously, make sense of it in real time. We're seeing advancement of all of the omics, proteomics, metabolomics, transcriptomics. There's basically more data that we could ever have that serves as like great raw material for novel innovation. We see new advancements in the next generation of AI, machine learning, natural language processing, federated learning, you name it. There's a lot of innovation happening at the algorithm level itself that again allows for the scalability. And there's also like better computing systems that allow us to process more of that extreme amount of data that's available and allow to both reduce the costs and make it to be more seamless in that scalable manner.
So
I don't know,
Alba,
Meg, from your end. Yes, please.
sorry, before Meg, Alba, a quick follow-up question. I'm a huge fan. Analytics, AI, necessary here already. The way we're going to deliver even higher quality care with all the data that's available to us. The data that's there that we're going to use for it, that data was not created for the use of machine learning, right? Maybe NLP, you can say anything's created for it, right? So where do we need to go? What do we need to do if we're, an entrepreneurial company who's going to start bringing in data or make new sensors? Are there things about data standards that you think are important such that the data we're feeding into these systems is going to end up giving us the right result? Because we just never kind of created that data with this in mind. We didn't know this was coming. So just your thoughts on that. I realize it's a tough question.
Yeah, maybe just personal thoughts, but I agree.
Yeah.
I think there's two streams. Like one is like the pre-existing data sources, and then like what we're designed like for the future. I think everything relating to data is still relatively complex, opaque, inflexible. We need to take into account compliance, privacy, security of the pre-existing data, as well as like plan for the future. And so in the planning for the future, I think that there's work to be done, for example, in how we structure data and how we look at interoperability of data and the electronic health records. But there's, I think, a lot of challenges as you guys are mentioning. And I think like for founders and early stage companies, it's just work to be done like in retrospective as well as like planning further ahead on what are the existing data sources and what are like new novel mechanisms to capture real-time information and capture it also outside of the hospital and clinical settings so that again we increase the amount of information accessible and can make better decisions from there.
I love the idea about thinking about that data outside of the clinical setting too, right? Not only patient-generated data, but community-level generated data to ensure that we're taking into account social determinants of health and what else is affecting people specifically. So, Meg, I'm going to turn it a little bit to you, not specifically about scale, but about a little duality that's been getting to me lately, which is we want to do things at scale and we want to do things in a personalized way. Jen, Joe, I want your opinion on this next.
Sorry, I didn't listen to the question because we're about to go into biotech, and we do have, because we're flipping back. It's a little tricky, like digital health biotech, and the crossover. But there are a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs out there. Here's one of a fan of our show, Maya Thu. She is with VisaCell, calling in from La Jolla, California. So enjoying the show very much. She's a innovator and entrepreneur. I think she's in the BARDA. Maya, or I'm not
Good.
sure if you're in the BARDA or the ISCT groups that I'm in. But glad that you're watching, and hope you can learn something, and keep pushing through with all the great innovation. Sorry, back to Dr. Bhatt and your question.
No, that's and I love how you started that though, right? Because we have life science and we have digital health, and we're trying to cross it. And so that maybe leads a little bit to how are we going to do scale, and how are we going to do personalized medicine, and how do we do personalized medicine at scale? And that question's just been bothering me. And Meg, I feel like you might have some personal insights that we could learn from. No pressure.
Yeah, as I say, I don't know if I have the most insightful insights, but I think so we've already talked about the issues of kind of, manufacturing and literally like how do you get it from A to B. I think what will be also interesting is to see how the regulatory landscape evolves. And so right now, I think, even if you have the tools to come up with therapies for ultra rare diseases with the kind of traditional path, it's really difficult to see how those get through kind of traditional regulatory processes. And so thinking through, are there going to be ways to, basket multiple types of rare mutations together? Are there going to be ways to innovate faster, better, clinical trials and things like that? And so that's an area that, as we think about personalized medicine and scaling it and how to actually roll this out, I don't envy the people who have to who have to figure out how to do this, but I am interested to see what kind of adaptations come from it.
Jen, can I direct something to you? Do you think decentralized clinical trials are going to make this better? What are your thoughts?
So I'm going to just throw it back maybe to the experts in the room and say, what are decentralized clinical trials? I'm assuming they're clinical trial data center.
All right. That wasn't as much of a layup as I thought it was going to be.
I can maybe, no, please.
Okay, no. Dr.
I think Alba's ready. I think Dr. Carda's ready.
I will just say that I do think that clinical trials are an area that can be ripe for discussion, as they're still costly, resource intensive. If you look at it from the patient perspective, it can be pretty burdensome in terms of going to the in-person site. It basically restricts the individuals that are able to participate either by geography or because of their own kind of like time restrictions that they have with other responsibilities and the type of data that it captures. It relies a lot on either self-reported data or measurements that are done at a snapshot captured during those in-person visits. And if it relies on self-reporting data, it's also more error-prone, less accurate. So certainly, I think decentralized clinical trials and innovation that are supporting either the trial design and participation, how do you democratize access and increase both the convenience, the representation, areas that are superbly interesting. How do you also, basically by taking it outside of the clinical setting and either bringing it at home or creating hybrid models, I think you're again thinking on how do you make it more patient-centric and less burdensome for them, so that both you increase the type of individuals that are able to participate, as well as like have them not drop off and finalize the trial. And in terms of kind of like possibilities from a data perspective, I think that advances to both wearables, monitoring devices, the use of smartphones can allow for more continuous measurement and offer more real-time, continuous physiological, behavioral changes in patients, higher quality data again, to then reduce the cost and improve the quality of data that's being used to take informations. So there's a lot of innovation, I think, in the clinical trial space that we're pretty eager to explore and look into.
No, it's wonderful. Alba, I think that the emphasis you just made about clinical trials is actually very true for just the practice of clinical medicine too. We do a lot of episodic checking on patients, and then we ask them to do therapeutics in a continuous manner. And I think changing that paradigm and flipping it and saying, we're going to measure you continuously, and then we're going to manage to episodically be able to treat you with things that will last longer, that won't need you to participate every day, take, the 7 pills in your hand and try and swallow them with the water, as, a recent elderly patient of mine commented on. I mean, there's a lot to do, remember, manage. And so I think that opposite of really monitoring all the time and then being able to episodically, whether it's treat or then catch things and survey and catch things earlier, is really a a great direction to go in.
So
Can we? Yeah, Jen, go for it.
So sorry, I'm just gonna, as we're moving towards the end, I'm really excited about making clinical trials more accessible, easier. And then Dr. Carda, to Dr. Carda's point, she did just say that, or I thought she said that the data that doctors have been capturing with these one-off times in this 15-minute snapshot, it's not that reliable or accurate, and we have to figure out a way to go to the person or the patient. And then that's where we're going to make really meaningful movement and good data, data equity. So like patients from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, working mothers can participate in. And that's when we're really going to move medicine forward. I do a lot of reviews on different committees and boards and stuff. And so most recently, I have reviewed some really great clinical trials, Dr. Bhatt, in your space, which is using some handheld ECG machines to population screen for AFib, which has been fascinating, completely done virtually. Like recruitment was done, and for an older population, 70, which it is a mistake to think that the older population is not on the internet. They are there. They sometimes like it on their phone. They sometimes crack their phone. Sometimes someone spits up on the, not like a baby because they're like babysitting. But so I'm really excited about that. I have my questions about how we're going to do that with traditional pharma trials. But for Meg and Alba, I don't know if guys know this, but Dr. Bhatt and I support the Convergence Forum, which is this meeting of venture capital and biotech, life science, and then most recently digital health CEOs. It's in a lovely place in Cape Cod. We're going to be there this summer as well. Oh, it was the fall that we lost power. That was great. I love no power on the Cape in like November. But we're going to be there this year. But Dr. Krench, for you, the big talk, and for me as a doctor, so maybe if you could break it down, is on using data or artificial intelligence to more quickly find drugs that work, or partner current drugs or old drugs or drugs coming down the pipeline with disease states that we weren't able to like mesh that data together. No, I'm breaking this down. Could you explain more about that and what you're excited about with that?
Yeah, I would say, that's definitely an area where we're seeing, I think actually it kind of is the one that spans all the the areas in my areas that I look at. And so I'm seeing definitely a lot of pitches right now where companies are leveraging AI and machine learning to try to improve drug discovery processes, whether it's like actual small molecules or, like you said, kind of mining old databases, or if we're looking at developing new biologics. There's a lot of really cool ideas. I think for myself as a biologist, somebody who toiled away in the lab, maybe my perspective might be a little bit, I might have some bias, but I think biology is messy. Like biology is super messy. And so I think the more of systems like that can take into account actual real biology data, as opposed to things that are more on the in silico side, I think that's really helpful, just because it's so difficult to predict what's actually going to happen, certainly in a human or in a model animal or even in a cell. And so I think that's the thing that gets me particularly excited as I'm looking at kind of AI ML companies, is like, okay, we have a validated assay that we know has been used for drug discovery in the past and it works. And now we have figured out how to, scale that up and mine it for information and like make cool insights from that. So I think the more that we can see actually drawing that original data set, I think you said, Joe, Dr. Joe, that like, the fidelity of that original starting data set, that matters a lot. And so the closer you can get to kind of replicating like what you would actually see in a patient, I think the more useful the output will be.
Oh, okay. So I have a follow-up question, and then when I have a question for Dr. Bhatt and Dr. Carda along the same lines. That data set, at least in my small doctor head, at least we think that the EHR was set up for billing, or I think actually a lot of people agree that the EHR was set up for billing. So having good, data that we bring into the EHR from a digital standpoint, we're like, this data is going to be really hard to make useful. How good do you think are the old data sets in terms of helping find drugs? And then how good are they moving forward? Because we have so much more capability to I'm going to break this down, like suck cells out of me or suck blood out of me, look at it, now I'm going to tag it in certain ways and say, this is this. How good is the old data set and the current data sets, and what are you excited about in terms of new data sets?
Yeah, I think it's definitely new data sets that are more on the therapeutic side, the things that we're seeing more, as you know, whether it's engineering new capsids for gene therapies, or whether it's trying to just get through some of those early stages of drug development much faster with combinations of AI, ML, and robotics and things like that. Again, I kind of go back to that like validated assay idea. And so when I think about something like cystic fibrosis, and there's a human bronchial epithelial cells, right? So you can have cells in a dish that we know we've seen that data translate from like good data in a dish has translated to meaningful clinical impacts in patients. And so I think, again, trying to look for stuff like that, where you can say the place that we're drawing our data from, it's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily have to be like clinical data that you're mining from patients, but to be able to say whatever we're mining from is like as a close approximation and something that we've seen translate in the past. That's really cool. I think there's a lot of AI ML companies that I kind of feel like I've heard the same pitch of like, we're hacking biology. We're going to do it all computationally, like a couple of times. And again, this is me as a biologist. I'm like, biology is super hard to hack. Like, it's not that all biologists are dumb. It's that it's like super messy. And so the more that we can see, I think, a little bit of an understanding for the fact that like you need to actually kind of bring in those biological systems as early as you can. I think that'll lead to better outcomes.
This may be one of our new quotes from the show. It's not that all biologists are dumb. I think that's great. It's just great. It's
We've
just
thought
such a
about this
complex
before.
area.
We recognize that there's inefficiencies, but you can always fix some of those things.
Oh, I love it.
So, Dr. Bhatt, we are getting close to time, so I'd like for you and Dr. Carda and Dr. Bhatt to finish on the same thoughts, which is because Dr. Bhatt, you're kind of starting to dive a little deeper into the American College of Cardiology venture fund and what you guys are interested in. But you know, the current data that we have, how do you like it in terms of being able to take that and make interesting algorithms, predictive analytics, efficiencies? Or do you think it's going to require, you know, a new shift of data, meaning like, hey, we're going to learn that in-patient EHR data or even EHR data from PCP is just not good compared to maybe, I don't know, what a patient with a Fitbit and something else and something else and something else attached to them is giving them. And we're going to see a dramatic shift. What are your thoughts on that? So maybe Dr. Carda, I'll start with you, and then Dr. Bhatt. And then Dr. Bhatt, you can finish us up for the day. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I touched a little bit upon it before. I do think that novel drug discovery and bringing drugs to market will require of like new data standards and kind of like thinking of the future rather than just thinking retrospectively of what data is available. And I do think that there's so much innovation happening at the forefront of the type of sensors, wearables, how do we capture, process, and make insights from these like novel data mechanisms. So happy to hear more about Ami and kind of like her take.
So Dr. Carda, before we go to Dr. Bhatt, I can just clarify that. So in terms of the wearables and sensors, you know, doctors and patients, we're not really prescribing wearables and sensors so much. People are trying to get us to do it. We're not doing a good job. So patients really just go out and buy their own. Are you pretty excited about the commercial sensors and wearables that are out there? Because, you know, Silicon Valley is popping out these companies left and right. And I chaired the Sensor Summit this last week. There's so many sensors that do so much that I'm wondering why are we still using this old school pulse ox? But do you think it's going to be the new companies, or do you think, you know, the power of these digital trials or algorithms is going to lie in the clinical side or the traditional academic side?
Yeah, I think it's a great question and great point. I think there's consumer devices that are focused around being consumer focused, and that, for example, I think we're going to see just mass adoption of everybody like having its own wearable. But the truth is that there's also innovation happening that is focused around having both the data standards and quality of information that you would require for clinical setting operations. So I think I'm bullish about both the fact that all potential patients and all individuals can better monitor their health, but also what are the devices that can actually be used to inform clinical decision making, clinical trials. These are companies that are working with regulators, working with the FDA, EMA, to really understand kind of like the quality of data that's collected, the veracity, how is it that they are protecting customer sensitivity, and are really creating kind of like the next generation of devices that will be usable by both clinicians as well as like pharmaceuticals, CROs, everybody in the industry that's working alongside to create better treatments for patients faster.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's a really great answer. And I get excited about like wearables. I now have like 5 of them that I don't wear. And I put them on periodically. So Dr. Bhatt, thanks. What are you seeing out there? And you're finally getting your feet wet with your role at the ACC. And you guys are having a lot of people roll into DC for cherry blossoms and
it is exciting.
cardiology innovation.
So I have to say, Meg and Alba, such an honor to have both of you here. Your experience, the course that you took to get here really informed so much of what you're able to now bring to the table. And so just really, really honored to be able to spend this time together. I love this stuff. So what I'm most excited about, this is the reason that this is such a great field for people to come into, no matter where you work, right? Whether you are a private equity person or you're a practicing clinician or you're in tech or science, there are so many opportunities because, Jen, the way you asked this question, the answer is just yes. The answer is yes, the wearables that the consumer have are important and likely carry valuable data at certain times for certain conditions. Yes, it is true that academic ventures are going to have to partner with other organizations, and those may be smaller startups and entrepreneurial ventures. Those may be large organizations that have been or coming into the workspace of how to deliver healthcare, because we need infrastructure. And in fact, infrastructure is already there and exists amongst many of these large organizations who have been there. So it doesn't make sense to recreate a different wheel. And so I think there are so many opportunities for alignment across all of these different industries that are going to make all this data valuable. We already have some work that is being done. So the Consumer Technology Association has been a great partner for the American College of Cardiology over the past many years. And most recently, we actually put out a statement on consumer technology. And so I think the first thing that is coming out is the idea that large organizations who are working this are able to help guide all of those who are coming into this realm and say, here's some basics that we just need to know to deliver high quality care. And not make the rookie mistakes. Mind you, there will be things that we will need to correct. We will need to iterate. We're not saying things will be perfect the first time, especially as Meg and Alba are talking about using AI and analytics. The idea that we get a right solution doesn't exist. The idea that we get a solution, we make it better, that's how it works. And so I think, again, really important that the societies, ours included, but many others that we, Jen and I, we had a great meeting with the American Medical Association just a few weeks ago. So there's so many different groups. We had a meeting with DIME, the Digital Medicine Society. So many great groups really thinking about bringing all of this together and giving some structure, some ability to create a framework on how we're going to move forward. And I think that's step one to your answer, Jen, is yes, all of these things are important. We probably need some framework that we're all following moving forward to make it as efficient as possible. And then we can all veer off into, I like this area. This is relevant to my company. This is something I'm passionate about, but then come back to the framework such that we're actually advancing healthcare delivery together. So, I mean, the future is bright for this area, and it's a collaborative future, which again is why I think people like the 4 of us on the screen love being in this space. So maybe with that, I see we are 12:47. Jen, I'll give you last word, but I will say a very, very enthusiastic thank you to both of you, Meg and Alba, and I hope that our paths continue to cross moving forward, because I think this is exciting. To those who are commenting, by the way, about more information about the ACC, our venture and our co-development, which is when we work with early stage companies to help them figure out how to get into this space better and what their technology is. Maybe Jen and I will talk about the opportunity of bringing ACC onto one of these shows, if that's possible. I don't know that it is, but hopefully we can merge those two worlds. So I'm not ignoring you. I see you and I'll respond to you, but I didn't want to take time away from Sanofi Ventures today. Jen, over to you.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Krench, for sharing all your insights and helping me understand more about life sciences and biotech. And I know that the audience really appreciate it. Dr. Carda, really great to see that Sanofi is really moving into digital health. Thanks for sharing your insights. We do have some questions from the audience about, what is the best way to get in touch with Sanofi Ventures or Dr. Krench and Dr. Carda directly. I was hoping you guys could close with just letting us know how our audience can get in touch with you.
Yeah, I can go first.
And it might be an info@sanofi.com.
So Sanofi Ventures actually has our own website. And so I think it's actually just sanofiventures.com. And so it might be possible to get in touch through there, or if not, Alba and I are both on LinkedIn. You guys are welcome to drop us lines.
Exactly. More than happy to connect with innovators anytime, and also email Alba, first name dot last name Zurriaga @sanofi.com. And thank you so much, Dr. Bhatt, Dr. Joe, for having us in the show. It was such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Thank you to our audience for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Dr. Krench, Dr. Carda, and thank you to all of our audience members.